As the election season ramps up, we'd like to share with you some information on candidates and races taking place across the Hawaiian Islands. Today we speak with Colleen Hanabusa, the U.S. representative for District 1, who's also one of 13 candidates in the race for governor. Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you decided to run.
I'm originally from Waianae, and I'm fourth generation Japanese American from the Waianae coast. And I'm an attorney by actually profession, and ran for the legislature for the first time in 1998, and took office in 1999. Served in the Hawaii State Legislature for 12 years, excuse me, the last 4 as the president of the Senate. I was the first woman to lead either house in the Hawaii State Legislature, and the first Asian woman in the nation to do that. In 2010, I left the legislature to take a position with the Congress of the United States, and that's when I first represented Congressional District 1, which is primarily urban Honolulu, and served there for 2 Congresses for a total of 4 years. And I had a break because I'd run for Senate to replace Senator Inoue. Did not make it, and then returned back in 2016 to finish the remaining term, which was only at that time about a few weeks for then Congressman Mark Takai, as you know, who had passed earlier, and also won the seat for this present 115th Congress. So I'm in the Congress of the United States.
On the topic of housing, the State Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism has said that Maui County needs 14,000 housing units by the year 2025 in order to keep up with the public housing need. How do you intend to address what some are calling a housing crisis in the state of Hawaii?
You know, I believe that there's no question there is a housing crisis. And this past legislative session, I think the legislature actually stepped up. They named a bill in honor of a former colleague of mine called the Bob Nakata bill. And the Bob Nakata bill had $200 million infused into the Rental Housing Trust Fund and about $360 million by way of tax credits to assist in the building of affordable housing. So we have the mechanism in place. In your question, or in your statement, which was very interesting, is you talked about public housing. And public housing, to me, is different than housing itself, whether it's affordable or affordable rentals. And the reason I say that is because when you talk about affordable housing, that also can be tied to quote-unquote development of private sector. And then there's a certain percentage, as you know, and I believe every county, Maui County including, has a requirement as to how many units must be affordable in order for a permit to be granted. So when we talk about affordable housing or public housing, the 14,000 figure, I assume, is that which is public. And then we have to be able to slice that even further to say how much of that is affordable rental, how much of that is affordable, quote, housing to purchase, or as some of my millennial friends call it, housing affordability, which is different from affordable housing because it's how much do they want to spend of their monthly paychecks to basically pay for their housing needs. The way I intend to address it is to have all of that brought together. In other words, we must determine how many units are rentals, because there are people who will never be able to purchase, and they will probably need a rental kind of housing situation. We also have to look at how much of those housing units are kupuna in nature, and what Maui would need in terms of the kupuna housing, and who would be best to provide that. And then you, of course, have affordable units to purchase, as well as I mentioned earlier, to rent. The purchase issue is one of the areas that I've been really interested in and working on, and that is really the issue of where do millennials want to live and how do millennials want to live, because they are the generation that we should be planning for now, and how do they want to live. And I think the problem that we've had as government is when we talk about anything that government's going to do is we tend to believe that people should live the way we think they should live, as opposed to asking that fundamental question, how do you want to live? And you know, I share with people the story that in Washington, D.C., I live in a true transit-oriented development. The reason is because, one, I want to know how it's done right, because Honolulu will have to do transit-oriented development. But the other part of it is I wanted to see the lifestyle and how is it that the millennials live and what do they choose to live. And what intrigues me the most is they like smaller units. They're not interested in all the trappings. They're not interested in on a house with a yard, with a 2-car garage and, 4 bedrooms. And one millennial told it to me this way. She says, I don't want to be a slave to a mortgage, but I do want to afford my own place. And if that means I have a smaller unit, but I can afford it and I can live there, then she says, fine, that's what I want. And she goes, and I don't need everything that basically she told me you guys seem to need. So I think that all of those things must be taken into consideration when we come up with a true housing package. It isn't one size fits all. It isn't one method. Maui does not have as high rises like we do in Honolulu, but that's also a way to economies of scale on how you address costs. And I think the millennial generation may actually prefer that style of living, and we can address that in terms of how we do it. But public housing has got to be flexible and addressing people's needs, and hopefully public housing will be built like what we call a P3, a public-private partnership, because of the fact that I don't believe government itself does building very well. So we should leave it to the private sector on how to do it, but not in terms of a development with certain percentage, but actually going out there and getting the best people qualified to build the units, however, in tune with how that group that we're targeting want to live, whether it be kupuna or millennials.
The recent death of a homeless individual in Wailuku town kind of highlights the fact that issues still exist with homelessness across the islands, despite the fact that there's been a drop in the homeless population, according to recent statistics. Would you support or do you find fault with the repatriation programs that have been suggested to fly homeless individuals out of state back to where they came from?
I think that there's always been the idea that we should send people back from where they came from. I don't believe they're as large a number as people think that they are. Because remember, especially for us in Hawaii, we have a group of people that you cannot repatriate, and those are the people who are what we call COFA migrants. COFA is the Compact of Free Association, and they're people basically from Marshall Islands, Palau, and the Federated States of Micronesia. We can't send them back because of the fact that they have a right to be here due to the fact that we as a country conducted nuclear bombs and on them, Bikini Atoll and so forth, and they're not able to really return and eke out a living where they're from. So I think that there are different issues regarding the concept of sending people back from where they came from. I think that as far as those that we believe are from the mainland, or maybe from Oahu, depending on which ones you're looking at, I support that. I mean, I support that we should send people back from where they came from.
There's various issues surrounding quality of life in Hawaii. How would you address the issue of cost of living and people being able to afford to live here?
That's an issue that I've dealt with from the time I was in the legislature. I was always an advocate of the concept of a living wage versus a minimum wage, simply because a minimum wage doesn't in any way come near to what is necessary for a person to really survive in Hawaii. I think one of the most interesting issues now is you hear people talk about raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. But when Governor Ige, for example, talks about that, you should also know that we have people who are working for the state of Hawaii, at least in one particular jurisdiction, those that are represented by the HGA, almost 2,000 of them who don't even earn $15 an hour. So when we talk about that, we almost have to start with those employees that we can affect. You can't expect people in the private sector to go ahead and be happy about having this raise in what we call the minimum wage when the state doesn't even do it themselves. And more importantly than that, the other critical issue, and the reason why we have to talk about a living wage, is healthcare costs are going to go through the roof very shortly. So right now, the estimate is about $700+ a month for a family of four, and that's because of the fact that the Prepaid Health Care Act permits or requires the employer to pay almost 100% for the person being employed. However, the cost then becomes in the family plan. So what we're expecting is that within the next maybe 4 to 5 years, that number will double to maybe $1,500 a month. And some people feel that they're paying that already. So when you think about what it is to live in Hawaii, just thinking about the cost of healthcare, and believe me, healthcare in Hawaii is probably one of the cheapest in the nation. We have and we have one of the best. I think we're the fourth most inexpensive plan with the best coverage. And yet we are faced, when we look at $15 an hour, with a great burden as to how much of that money will people keep. So when we start talking about pay and cost of living and quality of life, we have to begin to realize that we have to dissect all these costs and see where people come out. And housing is a major part of that. That's why my millennial friends who's to make the differentiation between housing affordability and affordable housing, they're right on. Because how much of one's income is going to be spent on all these things that are necessities, and you can't do away with it. So we have to really begin to look seriously at the concept of what is a living wage in Hawaii.
And finally, we'd just like to know, why do you feel people should vote for you in this coming election?
I believe that my whole political journey brings me to this point, and that is to run for the governor of the state of Hawaii. The reason why I've chosen to run is because I believe that for everyone, we have this sense that the state is kind of rudderless, and more importantly, many do not believe that even if our economy is getting better, and we have all these wonderful statistics, almost like homelessness, that it really isn't. And they don't feel like they're doing better than they did before. So the reason why I want people to vote for me is because I want them to understand I am not same old, same old. And if you want same old, I'm not it. Because I believe that we are a wonderful state, and we can do so much more, and there's so much potential in this state. And I'm also motivated by one thing that I want people to remember. In 2008, we did Sustainability 2050. Sustainability wasn't a well-used word then as it is now. And in that process, we asked a group of high school seniors who were all headed to mainland colleges. And we asked them, how many of you will come back? Not one hand went up, not one hand. And when asked why, they said, we don't believe Hawaii has a place for us. We don't believe that we can have housing here, and we don't believe we'll have a job that we'd like. So that's why we don't think that we'll be able to come back. That is an image that drives me and stays with me. I want to have the next generations all feel that they have a place in Hawaii. They don't want to stay here for other reasons, that's fine. But not because they don't believe Hawaii has a place for them. So when you vote for me, you're voting for somebody who has that goal, who feels very passionately about the fact that we need to have the jobs, the kinds of jobs that people want, that generation want, and they feel that they have a place here. So even, for example, housing. The one thing that I feel that I'm very different about and I'm very adamant about is I want to know what kind of housing and what kind of jobs do they want. Because if I don't understand that, how can, as a leader of government, how can you provide a situation where people would want to be part of Hawaii? Hawaii's uniqueness and Hawaii being special is because of its people. And if we can't keep the next generation and generation after them here, we haven't done our job. Matter of fact, that's been always my definition of sustainability. Sustainability is being able to watch your grandchildren grow. That is sustainability.
Well, thank you for joining us, and thank you for watching. You can find more election information online. For Maui Now, I'm Wendy Osher. Everything Maui, always now.